Good morning everyone and welcome back for another beautifully sunny training diary. I have quite a few updates for you. Very unfortunately, not all of them great, but I think it's easiest if we just crack on and I will let you know what's going on as we go along. Today I'm going to be doing flat work with Scandal, probably bringing in a working equitation obstacle or two. I'll then be doing pole work with Zen, focusing on the canter and a bit of adjustability and keeping balance. And then I'm also going to be working another horse who I'm bringing back under saddle, but I will fill you in on him when we get to that point. I actually can't believe how dry and hard it is at the moment. That week of really hot weather has just killed the ground. So Zen's falling over again. So I've actually decided I'm taking Zen to, don't want to rope over my shoulder. I'm taking Zen to Howick this weekend. And then I've decided I'm actually not going to do any more events, I think, until we've had a bit more rain. So normally I'd start a summer break in August. But I think I'm going to start a bit earlier, sort of mid-July this year, just because there's no point running them, especially not at their stages. They can do a lot just by training at home, can't you? So that's the plan anyway. So with Scandal, I'm really trying to work at the moment on improving our communication and being a bit more on the same page. That looks like me being much more precise and disciplined with myself so that he has clearer idea of exactly what I want from him and sort of what our expectations are. I do feel like we're making progress, actually. Good boy, back you go. Hello. I do feel we're making progress. It's just one step at a time. It takes a little bit of time. I actually set up this obstacle to be either an L-shaped sideways pole or an L-shaped rein-back corridor. But right there, you can see Scandal and I started having issues with the sideways pole. And actually, it's something that I see quite commonly with the L-shaped sideways pole. Now, as we come along, if you look at his front legs, they stop and stay still, while his hind legs pivot around the front. And what you want, even here when I give him a bit more room, make it easier, there they get stuck. And what you want on the sideways pole is for the front legs to keep stepping and the hind legs to just take slightly smaller steps around the front. So I needed to break it down and start off by taking away the sideways pole completely and practicing what's called a pirouette renversé. And this is, so there we went backwards. We do not want him to be going backwards, but this is essentially a turn. Think of it like a turn on the forehand with a flexion, with the bend in the direction of travel. And what I want him to do, as you can see, he is really rushing. He's taking massive steps behind, which are unbalancing him, and occasionally he's not maintaining the forward direction. What I want him to do is to slow down and be a bit more thoughtful. And then there was better. And then I want him to take slightly smaller steps behind and just really maintain a walk rhythm in front, like there. Good, so that was much better at the end there. And this is just something to patiently and quietly work through, especially when he's getting a little bit het up, because to him, he's rushing because he says, I know what you want me to do. You want me to bring my hindquarters around my front, so he's just trying to throw them around. So my job here is just to stay very quiet and to really catch and reward those more gentle, softer steps. So there he was a bit more gentle and soft. I then practice it as if there were a sideways pole. So there obviously isn't, but I do a 90-degree turn with it, just encouraging him like there to keep stepping in front. It was a little bit quick still, but he got the idea and he remained forward and stepping. And then I move it to the sideways pole, and you can see there's a good improvement here. Those front legs keep stepping. For when the poles are actually touching, he's going to need to close it down even more, so it's a smaller circle. But it's about just introducing it gently and steadily, one step at a time. And he's not going to get it right every time. There, we step backwards, too quick behind, too big behind. And here again, it's actually a better rhythm, and he manages to keep stepping consistently in front. But you know, I'd still like him to find a bit more relaxation, but it's all work in progress. Onto the trot, and actually I was doing very similar to what I was doing with Jimmy and Zen in my last video, which is just playing with the adjustability of the trot. So with Scandal it's a bit more advanced, so I'm really sometimes asking him to come right back, and then I'm asking him to open up, and my goal really is to maintain a steady rhythm. And obviously I want as much difference as possible, but that rhythm's got to stay steady, because Scandal has a particular tendency, as you saw in the walk as well, to rush a little bit. And I also have a tendency to push horses out of their rhythm. So between the two of us, we've just got to find a way of mentally and physically relaxing in that rhythm, and then from there finding a bit more expression and amplification of the stride. Similarly, when I do shorten him up, I want to maintain energy, but I also don't want to add tension. So it's a real balance. And there you see I shorten a little bit, and then I ask him to move forward, and we don't always a shortening there again, and then a bit forward, just as we go off screen. And I know I've said it before, but I'll say it again, if you don't maintain a steady rhythm, the horse doesn't have time to step up properly and use its hind end properly and correctly. Also, you increase the risk of losing balance. So there's shortening and a bit of more opening up. Little bit of shortening here, and then moving him forward. It's not huge, and it's not going to be, it's just about really playing and adjusting within that. Sure, I want to work towards more expression for tests and everything, but in training this is exactly the sort of work I want to focus on. So my first update is about Bella, and anyone who's seen my video from last week will know that she was meant to go eventing and I had to withdraw her. I also withdrew her from a working equitation competition since then. To cut a long story short, I went out cross country. You got a really good itch, haven't you, Bella? I went out cross country schooling with her a good few weeks ago now, and she was just, her heart was so not in it. She just, from the word go, was not keen, was not jumping well. So I ended up just stopping the session completely. I thought, you know, I'd come back to it later. Luckily I did that, because it turned out her eye condition, she has an autoimmune eye condition, it turned out that was having a flare-up. And we did manage to catch it, hi sweetie pie, quite quickly, and we thought we were out of the blue, and then it seems she went and scratched her eye. In the process of scratching her eye, she gave herself an ulcer. That ended up getting really quite scary, and there were concerns that it could turn for the worst and she could lose her eye quite easily if we didn't manage to get it under control. Touching loads of wood, I think we've now got it much more under control. Good girl. But she's, and you know, hopefully we're out of the woods now, but I've decided that actually an eventing career is just not feasible for her. It's not fair, it's not feasible, and it's not fair on me either, actually, to be leaving the start box not really knowing whether I'm on a horse that's healthy and happy. So she's currently out of work until we can really get her feeling better. She's got to keep her fly mask on, which is why I'm not taking it off. And yeah, I'm hoping she'll be able to transition to doing more dressage and working equitation. That will just be a case of working with her a bit and seeing how she gets on and whether she enjoys it. So yeah, it's not been the best, most cheering couple of weeks for her, but I'm hoping that now we're on the up again and she's hopefully going to start feeling a bit better. So in the walk, Zen and I have a work on point that will actually make a huge difference in the long run, which is getting him to yield very slightly on the circle of that inside leg. And I'm particularly interested in him stepping evenly and slowly behind so that he really starts loading his hind legs equally. And obviously the slower you go, the longer the hind end each leg is having to push for. On the left rein, he finds it even harder because that left leg is much weaker on him. So really getting him to slow and step under like there is really difficult for him, and it's not to be underestimated as a tool and as something he needs to learn. So moving on to our pole exercise, I was very conscious about not over collecting him today and pushing him too much because he's done a lot of more collected, engaged work recently. So I just start off with a nice regular working trot over the poles just to make sure he's happy with them and sort of give him an idea of what's coming, which is a circle. Moving on to the canter, and I start off on the left rein because that's the rein I know will be a bit easier for him. Now, where Zen has a stronger right hind than his left, and this was put to me the other day this way, which I thought was really interesting, he consequently pushes more with the right hind, and that pushes him onto his left shoulder, which is why he tends to fall in on the left shoulder and fall out on the right rein. Now on the left rein here, we're doing a circle left, so actually it's actually kind of easier to keep him up off that inside just for this exercise. And he does a really nice job of both fitting in 4 strides and 5 strides on this exercise, which was the goal. However, on the right rein, I had real trouble turning him and keeping him balanced, where he just wants to disappear off out that left shoulder and overbend to the right. Now I started off just there, you saw it was a bit dramatic, but just by trying to counterbend him once I realised I was having these problems, it looks really messy. And actually when you're trying to teach a horse how to balance itself without interfering too much, it can be very messy. But if he can just learn to be a bit straighter through that shoulder and that neck, he'll be able to align himself better the whole way through his body and then balance himself and sit more evenly. After playing around with the poles, I decided let's take out the poles and go back a stage, and let's just try and ask him to canter with a counter bend. And here you can see how difficult it is for him to even strike off with a counter bend. So just patience, give him time to work through it and think through it. You don't want to be rushing or hassling a horse for this, because then once he gets the idea, you can see he just starts to get the idea a little bit. If he loses balance, that's fine. I just ask him to keep going, or I'll stop and restart, depending on whether I think we can salvage it. And then there's just that sweet spot where you just think, yeah, okay, he's much better balanced. And it's a feeling. It's a feeling like everything can just sort of be released a bit and he can just carry on by himself without too much interference. I then didn't do the full circle. I just did 2 poles at a time, just to practice that turn and that disruption of having a pole in the way and just maintaining that balance despite the pole. And then I ask him to do it again, and I start doing all the poles together. And you can see we lose balance a little bit. It's a bit imperfect. Came inside just when I felt I needed to rebalance him, and then I took him back out, and you can see gradually over time that was messy there, and then we start to get a better balance. I'm not so fussed where he's more on the inside shoulder now, because actually it's a bit like with the person's position. Sometimes you have to overcorrect it so the person, or the horse in this case, can start feeling the opposite, and then you can go back to doing it a bit more refined and having a bit less of an extreme counter bend. You'll see there I just did a bit on the left rein to give him a bit of a break and a bit more confidence. Then I brought him back on the right rein, and this is much, much better balanced. So yeah, my next step obviously would be to reduce that counter bend a little bit and get him a bit more even again, but you know, I'm here to educate and train him. I'm not here to create a perfect picture. Well, wouldn't we all like to create a perfect picture? So yeah, it was very interesting. It wasn't quite what I expected from this session, but it was a very useful outcome. My next sad update is that Dazzle's swollen tendon, if you remember in my last video, he'd come in from the field with a massive swollen tendon, and it's not good news. I was hopeful it was tendinitis, but it's not tendinitis. He has done some damage to his check ligament. It is not completely ruptured or anything like that. But I think we're looking at a year out of work completely before being able to bring him back in for rehabilitation. So that's going to be fun. Hopefully he'll be able to go out in his field soon. So he has 6 weeks box rest with loads of icing, and then hopefully out in his field. But obviously a huge disappointment, and he'd just come back under saddle and he was doing amazingly, much more happy with life. Is that a good bum scratch? But it's the way they go. It's horses, isn't it? And with any luck, we'll keep everything crossed that he can make a recovery and come back firing on all cylinders in a good way, Dazzle. Because we know what firing on all cylinders means for you when it's not a good way. Now, I mentioned there was a new boy on the block, but that's not entirely true, because this right here is Alfie. And he is the horse that kind of started my whole journey into horsemanship, excuse me, and being a more sort of conscientious rider and horsewoman. He's been on a little bit of a 3-year gap. I think it's about 3 years, maybe a bit longer. Basically because I got injured. I injured my back quite badly about 4 years ago. And we decided at the time, he has a history of being a bit unpredictable. And we decided at the time that it just wasn't worth risking me re-injuring myself, especially as I couldn't consistently work with him. So we temporarily retired him. But the goal now is to, while I got a bit of time with Dazzle out, see if I can bring him back in to sort of produce on for a little bit of dressage. So I'm looking forward to it. He's a really cool, very talented horse, which is partly why he and I ran into trouble together. It's very easy to push them and go over past their boundaries when you know that they've got talent. It's a very bad but quite easy thing to accidentally do. So anyway, introducing Alfie. He is, as you can tell, quite the character, and yeah, I'm just gently interested to see how we get on. There's no pressure or anything. So I'm just going to run you through the sort of checklist I do with a horse before I get on in terms of what training I'm looking as their foundations. With Alfie, I'm very conscious about creating curiosity. He has a tendency to be very flighty and a bit jumpy like there. So really throughout all of this work, if there's an opportunity for him to be curious and bold, I very much encourage it and allow him to lead on that front. The next thing I want is for him to be responsive to body language before aids, to be honest. Now, it's been interesting working with him because compared to my current horses, back when I trained Alfie, I had a tendency to escalate my aids and be a bit louder with them. So he didn't really get that piece of his education where he cues in very sensitively to body language like more of my current horses. So here I'm asking him for a yield, and then I ask him to move his quarters, and then I ask him to come towards me and back up. Just by playing around with these little questions, I can ask him to respond to my body before my aid, and in doing so I'll release on the response, even if it's only tiny, a shift in weight to my body language, and that's the goal there. The next thing is that when a horse has been out of work or is coming back into work from rehab, for example, they're going to be very stiff through their body. So my next step is to say, can we supple you up through your body? And here I'm asking for a yield to supple him up through his ribs and start getting him stepping under and opening up, especially stepping under behind and opening up behind. I want these steps to be very thoughtful. Here I'm asking him for lateral flexion, and I want it through the pole. So I'm asking him to flex his neck, and there it was very tiny, but there he had a very small moment where he released at the pole. It's there you see he bends through the base of the neck, but what I want is that top end of the neck I want to The pole is a very tense, tight place on most horses. So if I can get the pole to release, I can get him to often release a lot of tension through his whole body, but especially that top of the neck. And it's a very crucial thing that they're supple and soft through the pole once they're under saddle, because it's the foundation really for any bend. If the horse isn't supple at the pole, any bend you have is not going to be true, and it's not going to be through their whole body. So I ask for a bend, there he's at the base, and then the moment I feel the pole releases, like there, I will release. It's not a huge thing, but it's just enough. I've then just got to readdress his relationship with mounting and then ridden work once I get to that point. So what I want him to do is to feel happy and confident standing by a mounting block, even when I'm jumping about. And then when I get on him, I want him to feel confident that he can just stand and it's all fine. It's no drama. So I just there was patting the opposite side of him, and then I go to hopping on. And he's going to walk off. And I'm not going to sort of tell him off for that. I'm not going to be too quick to correct him. I might give him a little bit of a woe with the rope, just to say, actually, what I do want is for you to stand still. But what I'm going to do is give him a bit of freedom to do as he wants so he doesn't feel trapped. And then the moment he stops and stands still, I'm going to hop off. And this just teaches him that actually there's no need to walk off, that he can just stay, and that's when the release is when he stays. And we do make some good progress, because by the end, this is the point I stopped on, by the end he did actually just stand by the mounting block. So that's just one thing I've got to slightly unpick from before, but there's going to be a few bits like that as I bring him back into work. Oh my god, it's tea. Back. Not that far back. Slight change of plans, and I'm just going to take Jim out for a hack with my sister. So my last digital update is about Jim Jam himself, and it's not a bad one at all. It's just to say I've decided I'm not going to be eventing him in July or August. So that's him done now for the summer on the eventing front. And there's two real reasons behind that. The first is I want to really focus on his lack of confidence in big open spaces. So I want to just use these couple of months to really try and focus on that before I bring him back out for the autumn. And the second reason is I think he'd also really benefit from quite an intense couple of months on the flat work front, just to really try and help bring him on and just get him a bit more supple and strong ahead of the autumn. So yeah, it's really just about taking a bit of time out of eventing for him, which honestly I'd take August out anyway, but a bit of time out of eventing just to focus on his foundations. I feel like today's actually gone really well. Like, I actually feel like all three horses that I worked made really cool progress. I wasn't actually expecting to resolve little things with all of them, but I did, which is really awesome. Days like that are just epic, really. Obviously it's not been the easiest time recently in terms of everything that's been going on with the horses and with myself. So, I mean, it is very much the way of horses, isn't it? Everyone knows, I don't need to say. It's just a case of, we keep picking ourselves back up, hopefully help the horses through their niggles and then come out the other side. But anyway, that is enough waffling. There's been a ton of waffling in this video. I hope you have a fantastic weekend, and I will see you in my next video.